Have you ever walked past a place that just feels wrong? A place where the air hangs heavy, thick with secrets? Well, that's Fever Ash Grove for you. Tucked away in a forgotten corner of London, it's not the kind of place you'd find on a tourist map. The houses are old, with peeling paint and windows like vacant eyes. They lean against each other as if sharing grim tales in the dead of night. Towering over everything is the forest. The locals don't call it Fever Ash Grove Woods. No, they have another name for it. They call it the Bloody Forest. A chill runs down your spine just hearing it, doesn't it? It's a place where shadows dance even when there's no sun, and the wind whispers names of people long gone. The stories started generations ago. They say if you listen closely on a moonless night, you can hear a piano, a sad, lonely tune drifting through the gnarled trees. The notes hang in the air like frozen tears. Then another sound joins in, the angry, distorted twang of a guitar clashing with the piano's sorrow. It's a duet of despair, a symphony of a tragedy that stained the very soil of the grove. The children of the area have a rhyme they sing when they play hopscotch, a rhyme that their parents always try to silence. Don't go into the woods at night, or the Brinchans will give you a fright, one of sorrow, one of rage, trapped forever in a leafy cage. They giggle as they sing, but their eyes dart nervously towards the dark tree line. People who live near the grove have learned to keep their curtains drawn. After sunset, they've heard things. Footsteps on dry leaves when there's no one there. A woman's soft weeping that turns into a man's furious roar. Some have even claimed to see figures moving between the ash trees, one a shimmering, mournful shape, the other a dark, hulking mass of pure anger. They say these are the spirits of the Brinkman family, doomed to replay their final, horrific moments for all eternity. The Bloody Forest holds their story, and it doesn't like to let go. It wraps its roots around the memory, keeping the horror fresh, waiting for someone foolish enough to wander in and listen. The legend has become a part of the local identity, a dark stain on the community's heart. Estate agents struggle to sell properties nearby, and the local council has given up trying to develop the land. The woods just seem to resist. Tools go missing. Surveyors get an unshakable feeling of being watched. The air grows cold and machines mysteriously fail. It's as if the grove itself is haunted, protecting the tormented spirits within. It's a place saturated with sadness and fear, a living monument to a family's destruction. And tonight, the wind is picking up, carrying that faint, sad piano melody once more. Can you hear it? The Brinchan family lived in the largest house on the edge of the grove, a grim, stone-faced building that seemed to scowl at the world. It was there that the nightmare began. The family was made up of 3 souls trapped in a web of fear. There was Alaric, the father. His name was whispered with dread throughout the neighborhood. He was a man with a thundercloud for a face and fists like hammers. His presence filled every room, sucking the air and light out of it. He was a storm, always on the brink of breaking, and his family was caught in the eye of it, waiting for the inevitable destruction to rain down upon them. Then there was Beatrice, the mother. She was a gentle soul, a stark contrast to her monstrous husband. Her love for her son Robert was her only shield against the darkness of her life. She found solace in her old upright piano, her fingers dancing over the keys to create melodies of heartbreaking beauty. Each note was a silent plea, a tear she couldn't shed, a dream of a peaceful life she knew she would never have. Her music was the only light in that suffocating house, a fragile candle flame flickering against a hurricane. She played for Robert, hoping the music would protect him, would build a wall of sound around his young heart to keep the cruelty out. And then there was Robert, a boy growing up in the shadow of a monster. He saw the bruises his mother tried to hide with her long sleeves and high collars. He heard the muffled sobs from behind her locked bedroom door. He flinched at the sound of his father's heavy footsteps on the stairs. Alaric's rage was a poison, and Robert was forced to drink it every day. The boy was torn in 2. One half of him was his mother's son, sensitive, kind, and full of a quiet sadness. The other half was a dark seed planted by his father, a seed of anger and resentment that was watered daily with fear and violence. The house on Fever Ash Grove was not a home. It was a prison. Beatrice tried to create pockets of warmth for Robert, reading him stories and teaching him her sad songs on the piano. But Alaric would always shatter the peace. He would burst in, his voice a gravelly roar, and smash the fragile moments to pieces.
Stop filling his head with that sentimental rubbish.
Robert learned to be silent, to be invisible. He learned that love was fragile and that anger was powerful. This was the lesson his father taught him, a lesson written in fear and pain, a lesson that would shape the man he was destined to become. The night it all ended began like any other, with a storm, not just outside where rain lashed against the windows, but inside the Brinchen house. Alaric was in a rage, his voice echoing through the halls like a clap of thunder. He had been drinking, his usual fury amplified into something truly monstrous. Beatrice, her face pale and drawn, tried to calm him, her voice a soft whisper against his roaring gale. She had decided she couldn't take it anymore. She was going to take Robert and leave, escape the prison for good. She told Alaric this, her newfound bravery a flickering flame in the face of his inferno. Alaric's laughter was a terrifying, guttural sound. He grabbed Beatrice by the arm, dragging her out of the house and into the storm-swept woods.
You're not going anywhere. You belong to me.
Robert, hidden in the shadows of the hallway, watched in horror. He saw the terror in his mother's eyes and the madness in his father's. He followed them, his small feet sinking into the mud, the rain plastering his hair to his face. He crept through the thrashing trees of the bloody forest, drawn by his mother's desperate cries. He had to help her. He had to do something. He found them in a small clearing, the trees forming a circle around them like silent, horrified witnesses. Alaric was standing over Beatrice's still body. There was no piano music now, only the screaming wind and the frantic, terrified beating of Robert's own heart. Alaric turned, his eyes landing on his son. A cruel, twisted smile spread across his face.
Now it's your turn, boy. I'll beat the weakness out of you for good.
Robert scrambled backwards, blind panic taking over. He tripped over a thick root, falling hard as his father loomed over him, a monster silhouetted against the lightning-streaked sky. But fate, or perhaps the forest itself, had other plans. As Alaric raised his hand to strike, a bolt of lightning struck a nearby ancient ash tree. The tree groaned, splintered, and then crashed down with a deafening roar. A branch, thick as a man's body, struck Alaric, pinning him to the ground. At the same time, a lantern he had been carrying shattered, its oil spilling and igniting instantly. Flames erupted, consuming the dry leaves and the fallen tree, and with them Alaric. Robert could only stare, his mind numb, as the fire roared, his father's screams mixing with the crackling wood. The rain fell harder, but it couldn't quench the flames of that terrible night. The fire that consumed Alaric Brinchen did not cleanse the grove. Instead, it seemed to bake his evil into the very soul of his son. Robert survived the night, but the boy he was died in that clearing alongside his parents. He was found the next morning, wandering aimlessly, his eyes empty, his clothes soaked and smelling of smoke. He didn't speak for a year. When he finally did, his voice was different, colder. The softness his mother had nurtured was gone, replaced by a harsh edge that mirrored his father's. The piano in the old house fell silent, its keys gathering dust. But Robert found a new instrument. An old battered guitar his father had once owned, and from it he coaxed angry, jarring chords. As Robert grew into a young man, the dark seed his father had planted began to sprout. He became a bully, his quiet resentment twisting into open cruelty. He had his father's temper, his father's intimidating presence. The other kids in Fever Ash Grove learned to fear him, just as their parents had feared Alaric. They would scatter when he approached, his shadow falling long and cold over the playground. He found a grim satisfaction in their terror, a twisted sense of power that filled the emptiness inside him. He was becoming the monster he had always dreaded, an echo of the man who had haunted his childhood. He started to hang out in the bloody forest, the site of his trauma. It was as if he was drawn to the place, unable to escape its pull. He would sit for hours in the clearing where his parents had died, strumming his guitar. The music was nothing like his mother's gentle melodies. It was harsh, chaotic, and full of a raw, untamed rage. It was the soundtrack to his pain, a furious howl against the world that had wronged him. The forest seemed to listen, its leaves rustling in time with his aggressive rhythm. He felt a kinship with the dark woods, a sense of belonging he couldn't find anywhere else. He was the ghost of his father, haunting the living. The transformation was terrifying to watch. The boy who had once loved his mother's piano music now smashed things in fits of rage. The boy who had cried in secret now sneered at the tears of others. He hurt people not just with his fists but with his words, which were sharp and cruel. He pushed away anyone who tried to get close, anyone who offered a hand of kindness. He was building a fortress around his heart, just as his father had done, using bricks of anger and mortar of fear. The ghost of Alaric Brinken wasn't just in the forest, it was living and breathing inside his son. The cycle of violence was beginning again. There was one person who refused to give up on Robert. His name was Jack. Jack had known Robert before the fire, before the darkness had fully taken hold. He remembered the quiet, sad boy who would share his sweets and talk about his mother's beautiful music. Jack saw past the angry facade Robert now wore, and he believed that the friend he once knew was still in there somewhere, trapped and crying out for help. He was the only one who wasn't afraid of Robert, the only one who would sit with him in the silent, brooding house and try to talk, to break through the wall of rage. Jack tried everything. He would invite Robert to play football, to go to the cinema, to do normal teenage things. He hoped that by pulling Robert back into the light of the everyday world, he could starve the darkness that was consuming him.
Come on, Rob. Let's get out of this gloomy place. There's a world outside this grove.
But Robert would just glare at him, his eyes cold and distant.
You don't get it, Jack. This is my world now. This is the only place that understands.
The more Jack tried to help, the more Robert pushed him away. Kindness seemed to agitate him, to remind him of a softness he believed was a weakness. The very weakness his father had despised. One afternoon, Jack found Robert in the forest clearing, his knuckles bloody from punching a tree. Jack approached cautiously, his heart aching for his friend.
Robert, you have to stop this. This isn't you. This is your father.
The words hit a nerve. Robert spun around, his face a mask of pure fury.
Don't you ever say his name.
It was a warning, a line drawn in the dirt, but Jack, in his desperation, stepped right over it. That was the day the friendship shattered. Robert, in a blind rage, shoved Jack hard. Jack stumbled, falling backwards over the same thick root that had tripped Robert all those years ago. His head hit a stone with a sickening crack. For a moment, Robert froze, the fury in his eyes replaced by a flicker of horror. He saw his friend lying on the ground, still and silent, and in that terrible instant he saw himself. He saw his father. The monster had won. Terrified of what he had become, Robert turned and ran, leaving Jack bleeding on the forest floor, the angry chords of his life's music still ringing in the air. Jack survived, but, something inside him broke that day. Not just his body, but honestly his hope for Robert. He realized that the friend he knew was truly gone, replaced by a vessel for Alaric's rage. The violence escalated. Robert became a menace, his random acts of cruelty growing more dangerous, terrorizing the small community of Fever Ash Grove. He was a storm that had finally broken, and Jack knew that someone had to stop him before he destroyed everything in his path, including himself. Jack felt a heavy responsibility. He was the only one who had ever been close to Robert, the only one who truly understood the depth of his pain. The final confrontation was inevitable. It happened on the anniversary of the fire, a night when the air was thick with memory and dread. Jack found Robert in the clearing, of course. Where else would he be? Robert stood in the center, his guitar slung over his shoulder, his eyes wild and unfocused. He looked like a cornered animal, dangerous and unpredictable.
You came back. I knew you would. Everyone comes back to this place in the end.
The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint, ghostly sound of a piano, a sad counterpoint to the tension in the air.
It has to end, Robert. Look what you've become. This has to stop. Tonight.
Stop, it never stops, Jack. It just gets passed on.
He began to play not music, but a chaotic, violent noise, a sonic assault of pure rage. He lunged at Jack, swinging the guitar like a weapon. The battle that followed was desperate and brutal, two former friends locked in a tragic struggle under the watchful eyes of the ancient haunted trees. It was a fight between light and shadow, between memory and madness. Jack wasn't fighting to hurt Robert, but to stop him. He dodged and weaved, pleading with his former friend, trying to reach the boy he once knew. But there was no one home. In the end, in a desperate act of self-defense, as Robert came at him with a broken piece of wood, Jack had to fight back. The struggle ended with Robert falling, his body hitting the ground in the exact spot where his mother had died. There was a final shuddering breath, and then silence. The angry guitar noise was gone. All that remained was the sound of Jack's ragged breathing and the soft, mournful notes of the phantom piano weeping in the trees. With Robert's death, a new chapter of the haunting began. The tragedy was now complete, a perfect, terrible circle. The locals, already wary of the bloody forest, now spoke of it in hushed, terrified whispers. The legend grew darker, more potent. They said that if you were brave or foolish enough to enter the woods after dark, you wouldn't just hear the ghostly music anymore, you would see them. The ghosts of the Brinchans, father and son, locked in an eternal spectral war. The forest had become their purgatory, the clearing their battlefield. Alaric's ghost was said to be a being of pure rage, a hulking, dark spectre that moved with terrifying speed, its form flickering and indistinct like heat haze rising from a fire. His presence brought an unnatural cold, a sense of suffocating anger that could steal the breath from your lungs. He was the ghost of violence, forever trying to finish the attack he had started on that stormy night. His spectral form would lash out at the trees, at the air, at anything that crossed his path, his silent roars echoing in the minds of those who strayed too close. He was the forest's fury. Robert's ghost was different. He was the ghost of pain. His spirit was often seen near the spot where he died, a shimmering, translucent figure clutching a phantom guitar. From it came not the angry chords of his later years, but a discordant, painful wail that sounded like a cry for help. His ghost seemed confused, lost, forever trapped between the monster he had become and the sad boy he once was. Sometimes, witnesses claimed, his spirit would lash out, mimicking his father's rage. At other times it would simply kneel on the ground, its form racked with silent, eternal sobs. And so the bloody forest became a place of active terror. The sad piano of Beatrice was now a constant, mournful backdrop to the spectral violence of her husband and son. Their spirits would clash in the clearing, a silent, ghostly reenactment of their destructive relationship. Alaric would lunge and Robert would fight back, their forms passing through each other in a chaotic, never-ending dance of hatred. Fever Ash Grove was held hostage by its ghosts. No one dared to enter the woods. The Brinchan curse was now complete, a permanent scar on the land, a tale told to frighten children and keep adults locked safely in their homes. Jack could not stay in Fever Ash Grove. The memories were just too raw, the ghosts too real. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow in the corner of his eye brought back the horror of that final night. He was haunted, not by spirits, but by guilt and sorrow. He packed a single bag and left London, seeking a place where the trees didn't whisper dead men's names. He found his sanctuary on a small, remote island, a world away from the suffocating darkness of the grove. The air was clean, filled with the scent of salt and sea, and the only sound at night was the gentle rhythm of the waves. He built a new life there, piece by piece. He found work as a carpenter, his hands shaping wood into things of use and beauty, a stark contrast to the destruction he had witnessed. He met a woman, fell in love, and they started a family. He had children, a son and a daughter, and he raised them with a gentleness and patience he had learned to value above all else. He never raised his voice. His home was a place of laughter and light, the absolute opposite of the Brinchan house. He was determined to break the cycle, to prove that a man could choose his own path, free from the shadows of the past. But the past was never truly gone. It lived in the quiet moments, in the dead of night when he would wake up in a cold sweat. The image of Robert's face in his final moments burned into his mind. He would walk to the shore and stare out at the dark, churning sea, the waves sounding like a sorrowful sigh. He never told his wife or children the full story of Fever Ash Grove. It was his burden to carry alone.
I thought of Robert, the friend I had lost twice, first to darkness and then to death. I thought of Beatrice's sad piano music and Alaric's terrifying rage. The island was my haven, but a part of my soul would forever be trapped in the bloody forest.
Years passed, his hair began to grey at the temples. His children grew up. He lived a good life, a peaceful life, but he always kept in touch with his younger brother, Bruce, who had remained in London. In their letters, Bruce would sometimes mention the Grove, how the stories had only grown more intense, how the fear had never faded.
Jack would read these letters with a heavy heart. He had found his peace, but the source of his trauma remained. a festering wound on the world he had left behind. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the story wasn't over. The ghosts were still waiting.
Bruce, Jack's younger brother, had grown up hearing the whispers about Fever Ash Grove. He knew the story, not just the local legend, but the painful truth his brother carried. He saw the shadow it cast over Jack, even from an ocean away. Bruce was a different man from his brother. Where Jack was gentle and sought peace, Bruce was determined and sought justice. He couldn't stand the thought of those malevolent spirits terrorizing a community and tormenting his brother's memory. He decided that someone had to face the ghosts. Someone had to end the curse. He decided that someone would be him. He returned to Fever Ash Grove, a place he had avoided for years. The oppressive atmosphere hit him the moment he arrived. He went to the edge of the bloody forest, a place now fenced off with warning signs. He felt the cold, the anger, the sorrow pouring out from between the trees. He had prepared for this. He hadn't come with weapons of iron or steel, but with something he believed was stronger, an understanding of the tragedy. He knew he couldn't fight Alaric's rage with more rage. He had to confront the source of the pain. He waited for nightfall, for the anniversary of the final tragedy, and stepped into the woods. The forest came alive with spectral energy. The mournful piano music filled the air, and then the two ghosts appeared in the clearing, Alaric a vortex of fury and Robert a shimmering echo of pain. They began their eternal violent dance.
But I did not run. I stood my ground and spoke, my voice clear and steady in the haunted silence. Beatrice, I called out, not to the fighting spirits, but to the unseen presence behind the music. Your son is lost. He needs his mother.
At the sound of her name, the piano music swelled, and a third figure began to coalesce, a gentle, weeping spectre of light. Beatrice's ghost had answered the call. The appearance of Beatrice changed everything. The ghosts of Alaric and Robert faltered, their spectral forms flickering. For the first time, they seemed to see something other than each other.
Her spirit drifted towards her son. She reached out a hand of pure light, and as she touched Robert's ghost, the angry, distorted guitar wail ceased. Robert's form stilled, the rage draining away, leaving only the sad, lost boy.
Alaric's spirit let out a silent roar of fury, but its power was fading. The love of Beatrice was a light that his darkness could not withstand. The three spirits swirled together, light, sorrow, and fading rage. And then, with a final, sighing whisper on the wind, they were gone. The curse was broken. The forest fell silent. Peace, at last. The bloody forest could now finally just be the woods of Fever Ash Grove again. Or could it? Some say, on the quietest of nights, if you listen very, very closely, you can still hear the faint, hopeful notes of a single piano key being played.